Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Kyle's Corner. I have never done a live stream just by myself, so this feels really weird, but we'll see how it goes, and maybe I'll get into it after a few minutes. Today, I'm going to be going through all of my January reads, uh, taking real estate away from Jimmy Nuts here, who is doing the same thing tonight. You guys should all go watch it. But unlike Jimmy, who is going to do this all well and thoughtfully and with like nice graphics and, generally everything better. I am just going to just give my thoughts, and I'm probably only going to do this once because the reason I'm doing it is not because I want to transition to doing live streams all the time. It is because sometimes I just get tired of people like when they see that I read so many books and they're just like, "Oh yeah, like you must not be retaining that much," or like I mean, the worst one is when people are like, "You don't have a life," and it's like, actually, I worked 29 shifts this month, so I do have quite a lot of other stuff that I do. I just listen to audiobooks really fast, and I spend a lot of time reading, and I read fast. And because at the middle of this month, I was at like 16 read books, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lean into this. I'm going to try to read a book every uh, every day of the month and see where I go. And obviously, most of them are short books, but not all of them. So yeah, and we have Esme here, who is my ally in this, who reads more than me a lot of the time. Although last year, Esme, I did beat you last year. And Literal, I am flexing just a little bit, just this one time. I promise it will not be a regular thing. So this month I read 32 books. I DNF'd one book. I am going to finish one more book tonight. I have about 200 pages left in it, so that would bring my total up to 33. I read 2 short stories, and I'm in the middle of several other books. So I'm going to go through and talk about them. And some of them I'll just say like really short because I don't have much to say about them. But I'm going to try and give my non-spoiler thoughts on them as in-depth as possible so that, the next time I post a wrap-up somewhere and people are like, wow, you do you even remember or retain what you read, I'll just like link this live stream. Although I will say, I know most people who do it are just joking. Like I know they're like friends of mine that are joking. It's when people who don't know me start acting like that it starts to really bother me. So without further ado, I guess we'll get started. It is so weird doing a live stream by yourself. I don't know how people do it, but we'll just start this off here. So the first book that I read this month was very, very short. I read it all in one sitting on January 1st, and it is called The Crossover by Alexander Kwame. It is a middle grade basketball, I guess, novel for middle school, and it is told in like verse of poetry. And the reason that I read it was because Bookborn was telling me that she had gotten her son to read it, and the reason she was telling me is that she was like her son stopped reading it on like the first page, and she was like, "No, like actually give it a try." And then he like really loved it, and so she was telling me that story. I was like, "Interesting, like a middle grade book that's like written in poetry." And so I looked at my library, and it was there, and I just decided I'll give it a try, and I actually like really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. Like again, it's like a 1 or 2 sitting read. It's about this kid who's on the basketball team, and his dad has really been pushing for him to be like his dad is like a famous basketball player, and he's been pushing for him to continue getting better at basketball. And there's some stuff going on in his home life, and his brother and him have this like good relationship that's sometimes a little contentious, but it's all told is basically just like a poem, but like in story. And I thought it was really good. I think, if you have a teenager, if it just sounds interesting to you or a middle school or whatever, you should read it. I definitely think that it was worthwhile. And things are good, Rogue. How's it going? Yes, reading 30 books in a month is completely ridiculous. I agree. Foxing and Fiction, how's it going? Thanks for showing up. So yeah, that was the first book, really easy. And the second book is a little bit of a cheat because I finished it in January, but I read most of it in December, which is Assassin's Fate. So I read about 250 pages of it on January, like the first 2 days of January. And I mean, Assassin's Fate is just like one of the best books I've ever read. Like, I haven't put it on a list somewhere yet, but it's like top 10 for sure. But it could even be top 5. I don't really know yet. But just a spectacular ending, and it really like put Realm of the Elderlings, I think, pretty firmly in my 3rd favorite series of all time. Yes, it might be Book of the Year, Chadia, on January 2nd. It is unbelievable. I didn't cheat because I'm going to finish a book tonight. So I will have actually done 33 books in 31 days that I all started as May. So get off my back. But yeah, Assassin's Fate. I mean, the ending of Assassin's Fate like actually put me in a reading slump. It just was so good. I was crying at the end of it. Like I was like trying to finish the last chapter, and like there was just tears running down my face. And I was like, just like finish what you're doing, Kyle. And then I finally finished it, and I just sat there and I just cried, and it just like was like a cathartic, just like end of the world kind of cry. And I was just like, man, that was everything about that was perfect. And I totally get why people hype up that ending. Like I think it's my favorite ending to anything, to like TV, movies, books, anything. I just spectacular ending. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that my will actually was accepted. You know, house moving is very, very stressful. So I get this, but also I will say I get a lot of reading done when I am moving because I listen to audiobooks while I pack. And you can get through a lot of books while packing if you listen to audiobooks. Yeah, crazy. This is a great line. So the next two books are actually the only two that I don't really remember much about. And that is because I listened to them the next day after Assassin's Fate, just because I didn't know what to listen to. I was kind of lost in a drift, and I just wanted something short and totally different. And I just wasn't in the mood to read anything. So like these are the only two that I would say like really suffered this month from like the speed. And the first thing is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is like a little novella. I read it or I listened to it like over the course of, doing some chores the next day. And like this was good. I remember really liking the writing, but I honestly don't remember that much about it because while I was listening to it, I was mainly just like, man, Assassin's Fate is so good. So I actually think I will reread this probably next Christmas time because it is like a Christmassy story. But apart from that, I really don't have much to say about it. It totally suffered from Assassin's Fate. This is one for the haters where they're like, you read too fast. This time I did read too fast. So I will give it that. But I did read Claire Keegan later on in the month one more time, and that one went better. So, and then the next one is Stowaway to Mars by John Wyndham. This is like Audible put a bunch of like well done audiobook narrations of all of the like John Wyndham books on Audible. And this one was just on the plus category and it was short. So I thought I'd give it a try and it was fine. Like I don't have much to say about it. I don't even know if this was necessarily the Assassins of Fate effect, although I listened to it on the same day. More so just that it was fine. There's this woman who like stowaway to Mars, and she, joins this crew and she's not supposed to be there. And I kind of thought it was like, I think at the time it was probably a lot more interesting of a read, but the science has progressed so much from like I think it was like written in the 50s that it just kind of was like, okay, well we just know this isn't true now. So I kind of just read it without much to comment on. But I will say that after listening to it, I had successfully purged the emotions of Assassin's Fate, and I was ready to move on and actually care about what I was reading again. Esme paid full attention to Small Things Like These and doesn't remember a thing, which is great. Yeah, so Aslan's asking, did I actively try to read a book a day or is it just your normal? So I generally, like, at a certain point, I did switch over to very specifically trying to read a book a day, but I didn't start the month that I was just like, I just happened to listen to a lot of short things. And like in December, like I read basically the end of November and into December, I read Rhythm of War, Fool's Assassin, Fool's Quest, Wind and Truth, Assassin's Fate. And I just, that was so many big books that I just wanted to read short things. So then when I got halfway through the month and it had worked out to a book a day, I was like, well, I might as well just keep this going for the whole month. And so that's how that ended up going. I do not really read graphic novels, but not out of sort of any like bias. There's a couple that I'm interested in, but it's not really a world I know too much about. Like I would like to read Watchmen is about the only one that I can really say that I would really want to read. But I'm sure there's plenty of others that would be interesting if I knew about them. Okay, so after that, this book sucks. Okay, great. We can get a little bit of rant here. So then I listened to From Under the Truck, a memoir by Josh Brolin, and this is terrible. This is like this shouldn't be published. Like so when people ask me questions and they're like, "What are some of the worst books you've read?" I always think of ones that make me like really angry. Like I'll go to like Ready Player 2 or Catcher in the Rye or Rage by Stephen King. But this is genuinely one of the worst books I've ever read. I can't believe anybody published this. I don't know it is just fully a cash grab. So Josh Brolin, if you don't know who he is by name, he played Thanos in the Marvel movies. He's in Sicario. He's in Deadpool. He's in lots of stuff. He's in the new Dune movies. He's Gurney Halleck in those movies. And he's a great actor. I like him a lot. I have nothing against him. And this guy was just not. I honestly. So here's the thing. I work as a bartender, and I think that if you talk to any 2 a.m. like last call, and you're just talking to some guy, and some guy's trying to tell you a story, and the story doesn't hinge on anything, and he starts telling you a story about last week, but then he actually dips back to 1977, and then he pulls forward to 1999, and then he starts explaining some random side. That's exactly what this book is. Like, it is atrocious. And I know nobody here, well, not nobody, but most people here don't really read a lot of memoirs, but I really like memoirs. So this is not me hating on the art of memoirs. This guy just wrote genuinely terrible, awful literature, and I don't understand why he chose to do that. And a funny story about that is I have a local free library like a block away from me, like those little ones. And sometimes I'll go in there and put books in there. And normally the books in there are all older. Like that, I've never seen a new release in them ever, except like a week after this book came out, there was a pristine brand new copy of Josh Brolin's memoir. And I'm like, somebody in our neighborhood agrees that this book was terrible. So don't read it. Terrible. 1 star. Absolutely not good. And we can move on from that. Then I read The Kraken Wakes by John Wyndham. Again, I was trying to give John Wyndham another chance. And The Kraken Wakes sounded more interesting to me. I know that I'm not starting with his more popular novels. Like this also has a lower rating on Goodreads. But it just sounded interesting, and I was still in the mood for the short stuff. And it's better than Stowaway to Mars. I just think his writing style is very dry, and I have to keep in mind the time in which it was written. But there was a lot more interesting concepts in this one, I think, and the science aged better than it did in Stowaways to Mars. And I really liked the ending, but I just I couldn't tell you one character in this book. I remember the events, what happened in the book, and I don't remember a single character at all in it all. So that kind of just shows you what he was focusing on. I will try his most popular, but Day of the Trifids is the one that people tend to really like, and I'll definitely read that one. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so I'll read this one for sure, and probably one other one. I think there's one that Vanessa Kirby narrated on Audible that I'll probably listen to. I don't understand this. I don't understand this joke, Rabin. Until a copy of Wind and Truth crops up. What do you mean? And yes, Esme, it was cathartic. But yeah, so two quick reads from John Wyndham didn't blow me away, but I will read more from him in the future, some of his more popular stuff. And then I switched gears entirely, and I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This has been on my TBR for a long time. It is one of the most popular historical fiction books, I think, of all time. It's extremely popular. Her newest book is the best-selling book of last year, so she has a lot of fans. I've read The Four Winds by her before, and I liked it. It was fine. I didn't regret reading it. I thought it did a good job dealing with the Dust Bowl era of the U.S. and I think it was the 1930s, but it didn't blow me away. And Wind and Truth is not going to show up in there, Evan. It's absolutely not. But haters be damned. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, this is responding to comments and keeping my line of thought is a little difficult when I'm by myself. Oh, Nightingale. Okay, so yeah, so I started The Nightingale, and I am a little burnt out on World War II era historical fiction. I just think there's so many, and I didn't dislike The Nightingale. In fact, I actually think the writing in it was really good. But my problem with it is that if I was to read 5 historical fiction World War II books and try to pick out which one would be the really popular one, I don't know why it would be The Nightingale. And that's it was good. I actually have no complaints about the book until the very end. There's something that pissed me off that I was going to give it a 3.5, and then I dropped it down to a 3-star. Which I can talk about that non-spoilery actually. But yeah, I think it is a good, solid book. I can see why people like it. I don't get why it's when I think of The Book Thief or Night by Eli Wiesel or any other books on World War II, I get it, even if but I don't know. It has a sister, or it has a woman and her sister, and they they they're in the resistance, and people hate women doing resistancy stuff, and then they do it anyway, and there's like feminism and stuff. And then there's like a dual narrative where the woman is older and she's like with her son, and like she's hiding the fact that she actually took part in the resistance in World War II, and like all that stuff is good. Like, she's a spy and she's doing spy stuff, and I was never bored reading it. I actually thought the flash forwards, like when she was an adult or like when she was an old woman, were excellent. Every single one of those are really good. The main thrust of the novel, like there's a big part where I was obviously supposed to care, and I didn't care at all. And I was like, okay, so I just don't think her like character writing is really moving me. Ben, what book is this? Do you know what you're talking, like what the title is for this? So yeah, and then so at the end there's a line, and I will tell you the line if you really, I mean, I'll just say it quickly, but it is not a spoiler. But it really made me mad, which is at the end of the book, the son and her have a conversation, and the son gets like a hint that, maybe his mom's life hasn't been exactly what she thought. And she's like, he says, "How come you didn't tell me about this?" And she says, "Well, women get on with it, men tell stories." And then she just kind of like moves on. And I'm like, man, this is not the novel for this. Like, I understand why that would be included because, like, I think being charitable, she's trying to show that, like, there's many things that women have to go through, struggles they've had to overcome, and then they just move on with it. Like, especially like, I mean, still today, but especially like, in the past. I get why she put that in there, but it just was very like, it just struck me like, you're talking about World War II, where we had so many people who were traumatized and like don't talk about the horrors that they saw, like either in the camps or just like literally as soldiers. So to then like put her on that level to be like, I am also in the war, but I don't talk about it, but the men talked about it. I'm like, I just left such a bad taste in my mouth. I'm like, but aren't you just kind of slighting World War II veterans with this line? Like, I don't like, or just like people with PTSD in general from war. Like, I don't know. I really hated that line, and it felt like a very cheap feminism line that didn't actually mean anything for people to be like, yeah, women, and then but actually didn't like think through what that line meant in that specific context. So I really didn't like that line. I thought, especially like that's like near the end of the book, and I just was so mad about it. And I know it's just one line. I know it shouldn't ruin a book, but near the end of the book, you kind of should be like putting together your like thematic statement of some kind when you're ending a book about what you want to say. And it seemed like she wanted to say that, and I just didn't think that was the right time for that sentiment, even if it's like overall a sentiment that I would agree with. So anyway, I gave that 3 stars. Good book, a little bit not as highly rated as I hoped it would be, but it was good. Let's see here. That sounds interesting, Ben. I will try to. I think I've heard of this author. Maybe I have seen this cover. Yeah, that sounds interesting. After that, I moved to Michael Moorcock. I was going to continue with Elric, but then this book was available at the library, and I'd never heard of it. So it's called The Warhound and the World's Pain. It's one of the Von Beck duology. And I really like this. I liked this more than Elric. I thought this was great. I think more people should read it. I actually really want to read the second book soon. The premise of this, hold on, I need to take a sip of water. The premise of this book is that Von Beck is a mercenary, and he's lived kind of a not great life. And he meets this woman, and he's like, "Hey, that's a good looking lady." And he starts talking to her. And then she's like, "I want you to meet my employer." And he's like, "Oh yeah, who's your employer?" And she's like, "The devil." And he's like, "No, really?" And she's like, "No, really, the devil." And he doesn't believe her. And then so the devil comes and he takes him to hell. And he's like, "I want to recruit you for a mission because you're one of mine, and I need a mission done." And the mission is basically the devil regrets having left God, and so he wants to find a way to redeem himself, to get back into God's good graces and leave hell. Is essentially, and he needs somebody that is already a bad person that's willing to do things for him because he's already accepted the devil into his soul. Basically, I'm paraphrasing a little bit because the explanation is a bit long, but that's the basic premise of the novel. And so Von Beck then has to perform some tasks and go find the Holy Grail. And I thought this was a really good book. I thought Michael Moorcock's writing in this book was so good. I was really enraptured by the whole thing. And yeah, the book is called, let me see the name. I was calling it Von Beck, but the first book is called The Warhound and the World's Pain by Michael Moorcock. And yeah, it is just, it's very short, like 200 pages maybe. And I thought it was, so I've only read 2 Elric novels from Michael Moorcock, but it was a clear step above in the prose writing for me. I know he wrote it later in his career. Just like the sentence by sentence structure was really great. The thematic questions it was asking and about like what makes a person good and like whether or not they are whether they are all bad or all good, or if somebody is redeemable, and what makes somebody redeemable, like whether or not they can, you know, become redeemable through making themselves do good acts, or if they have to genuinely believe it. Yeah, I actually thought you had read this, Joe. That's interesting. But yeah, highly recommend. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Really liked it. Yeah, I do think it's better than Elric, but I mean, I liked Elric. Like, I'm not hating on Elric, but it is, for me, a much better novel than the first Elric. And the second Elric, I just thought was fine. So I definitely want to continue with that. Great book, highly recommend. And then I shifted gears to an entirely different route, which is I read T. Kingfisher's A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. And this book, whenever I was talking to people about this book, I don't think they actually knew what the premise was. The premise of the book is wild and just kind of like whimsical, which is that it's in a world where like people have, you know, magic powers. They're like wizards, and the wizards' powers manifest differently, and they're being prosecuted. And the main character is a 14-year-old girl who her power is that she can make bread rise. She can like make gingerbread dance and all that stuff. So she becomes like a really good baker. She thinks this is kind of a worthless power, so she works as a baker's apprentice in a bakery. And then the very start of the novel, she's like leaving the store, and there's a dead person, and somebody's been murdered in the shop. And so she's like, oh no. So at the very, very beginning, people think that she did it. And then they realize she probably didn't do it, but also she's a wizard, and wizards aren't supposed to be around. So then the I guess the political it's not the regent, but the whoever works for the regent, the governor, I guess, is trying to get rid of all the wizards. So she has to go on the run with a ragtag group of people and try to defeat this guy who is trying to get rid of magic in the world. And it sounds like it is a whimsical book, and it is not really. Like, it's not like super dark. Like, it's for sure more of like a classic it's essentially a classic fantasy book with like a twist. Because yeah, her magic is like, you know, silly and whimsical, but then the book itself is really just like a classic quest trope fantasy. But T. Kingfisher is a really good writer. I think she's very versatile. I really like that with each of her novels, they feel different. And I just enjoyed this book the whole time. It was fresh in a way that like most quest fantasies don't feel to me these days. I kind of like got pretty far into the book before I was like, I guess this is really just like a quest fantasy, which is interesting. And yeah, I will definitely read more T. Kingfisher. I think she's a great author, very versatile. And you know, this book, I wouldn't say gets dark. Like I would not go as far as say it's dark, but it's definitely more adult than I thought it was going to be based on the first like 10-15%. Like I thought it was a good book. And I would definitely recommend checking it out if you want something a little bit on the lighter side, but not like a cozy book by any means. Yeah, Ben, I actually think you would really like this book. This seems like a book that, like, at the right time, you would really enjoy. And yeah, Esme, I know you're a big Kingfisher fan. Ren really liked that book. Yeah, highly recommend. I think I'm going to read her newest book next. Oh, I'm blanking on the title. I could see the cover, but I don't know. Whichever one she released last year is the one I'm probably going to read next. Okay, I'm going to take a sip here. Next, I read Neuromancer by William Gibson, right? Yeah, that's who it is. And I buddy read this with Pete. I was really excited for Neuromancer. I liked it. Oh yeah, Sorceress Comes to Call. That's her newest book. Yeah, I'm sorry you weren't a fan, Chadia. So yeah, Neuromancer. Neuromancer, I was really excited for. I have not delved much into cyberpunk, and I felt like it was time to read some of the like starting points of that. I know that it was not literally the first cyberpunk book, but it largely popularized it. And I didn't love it. I will say, I think William Gibson's prose is really good. Like I think the way he constructs a sentence or like talks about an idea is very good. I really felt that he compelled the narrative forward in a good way, like just with the strength of the writing. Um, but the plot. So here's the thing: I had kept trying to put myself in the place of it's 1984 or 85 whenever this book came out, and the Matrix doesn't exist, and all these other things that are cyberpunk don't exist. And intellectually, I could do that, but like I can't convince myself to feel like the book felt new to me when a lot of it didn't. Like it's so clear that it inspired the Matrix. It's so clear that it inspired probably Cyberpunk 2077, which is what Pete was telling me about. It just feels like every cyberpunk thing I've ever seen pulled from this, and that's great for the book. I left the book feeling very impressed with what it managed to set, like how monumental it was for popular culture to come later on. But the narrative to me, just like I just didn't really like it, and I really think that William Gibson's like man writing woman stuff was just out of control. Just obsessed with boobs. Just like absolutely just dude, like get an editor, chop out 80% of this, and you'd still have a novel that has too much talking about boobs. Like it was like, dude, we get it. Like, holy crap. It was like all the time. And I'm like, man, can we just move on with the story? The premise of the book is really interesting. So what happens in Neuromancer is this guy was a cyber hacker of some sort, like a criminal, basically. And he works for this underground guy. And he gets recruited. He thinks that guy's trying to kill him. And so he gets recruited by a different shadowy faction. This guy's running a bunch of stuff. And he gets recruited by essentially Trinity from the Matrix. It's not Trinity from the Matrix, but it essentially is. And she's like, hey, you need to come work for my dude. I just realized I read 2 books like basically in a row where like a guy that's kind of shadowy gets recruited by a woman to join like a bigger organization to recruit girls. Kind of funny. Didn't realize that till right now. But he joins this other guy's organization and has to I don't know how to say this without spoilers. He just has to do a task for him that involves the cyberspace. Like I think it's the book that coined cyberspace. So he has to deal with that and then like find out what Neuromancer is, which you find out through the course of the book. And yeah, there was some really interesting ideas, and I just like could not get behind the conversation here with this. And Dan is currently reading Neuromancer. He's 10% in, and he likes the chaotic writing style. Yeah, I love the writing style. I think he's a really good writer. If he could just dial back the talking about women's bodies angle, because like it was brutal. And I will say, the only time I was invested in the book was like the 80 to 90% mark. I thought was really compelling. There was like some reveals about some of the characters that I thought was interesting that I didn't see coming. Overall, I'm really glad to have read it. I might read the sequels. I'm unsure if I'm going to do that. Shadia, do you mean that you didn't love Neuromancer? Or you didn't love What Moves the Dead? I'm curious. We have a lot of Neuromancer haters in the chat right now, which makes me happy. I mean, not happy, but I'm glad it's not me. Hello, Hannah. I do work. In fact, as I said at the beginning of this, which like I'm sure you just missed. Like I don't think you're. I worked 29 shifts in my job. Well, I have 2 jobs, but I work 29 out of 31 days. I work 29 shifts. But my shifts are pretty short. Like I work 5 hours a day, or unless I have a double, then I would work like probably 12. And I just do a lot of audiobooks fast, but I also just read fast. My wife and I tend to work opposite schedules. So ironically, I read this much without I tend to not read on Sundays or Saturday nights because I spend time with my wife. So I don't read until she goes to bed. So I don't have any of that time available for reading most of the time. And yeah, I don't like this month specifically. I read short stuff, so it's like if you're listening fast and they're short, it doesn't take that long. But oh no, Joe, you DNF the sequels. That doesn't bode well for me. I don't know, Aslan. I read fast. I didn't realize until like I did. I think it was with Jake and some other people. We like tested how fast we read a page, and that varies, right? Because depending on how complex the prose is. But I was forced to concede that I actually do like read a page faster than like some of my friends. So I guess I do just like genuinely read fast. But to me, I just feel like I put a lot of time in. Like if I'm not doing anything, I'm reading. If I'm playing video games, I'm listening to an audiobook. If I'm doing chores, I'm listening to an audiobook. If I'm watching a TV show I don't particularly like, I'm probably reading a book on my phone, which you probably shouldn't do, but that sucks, Chadia. I'm sorry. But you know what? You hate a lot of stuff, so that's on track. I cannot believe I'm half an hour into this. I've only talked about like 5 books. I'm going to take a sip real quick. I need like music to play when I take a sip of water or something so that you guys aren't just sitting there in silence. Okay, after that, I did Blood Over Bright. I don't remember if I said my rating for Neuromancer. I give it a 6 out of 10. Then I did Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This is a reread. I read it a little bit too close to Babel the first time because Babel by R.F. Kuang, which they're very similar books, but Blood Over Bright Haven is a much better book. And I love M.L. Wong's writing. I think she's great. This book was great. I liked it more on reread. David, this has to be a joke. This absolutely. Okay, well, this might be a different David. David's a popular name. If you're new here, David, that's my favorite series of all time. If this is a David that I actually know, then how dare you, sir? It will take you longer to talk about these books than it took to read them, maybe. Okay, it sounds like you're being serious, David. In that case, yeah, like A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite series. Like you can see it all right here. I have all of them. But yeah, so great series. Blood Over Brighthaven. My issue with Blood Over Brighthaven the first time is I felt like Emma Wong was writing a really, really good novel, and then near the end, she was just like, allow me to destroy all nuance. And then she did. And I just like that really drove me crazy after Babel, which I feel like doesn't have any nuance whatsoever. It just bluntly tells you what it thinks for 500 pages. And so like I still liked it the first time, but like that just bothered me. And then I had a bunch of friends who really liked it. I know Jake was like, it's better than sort of Keegan, which is wrong. That's absolutely wrong speak. And I was like, well, okay, I'll read it again now that the audiobook's out. And I really like the audiobook narrative, Moira Quick. And yeah, I mean, the book's phenomenal. Like it is so easy to keep reading. Like I listened to it so fast. Such a good book. My problems near the end are still there. The difference is this time it didn't bother me quite as much. Like I gave it a 9 out of 10. Just because I just think this is hard to talk about without spoilers, but basically you find out some stuff about the world, and then she decides side characters aren't going to act the way they've been acting up until that point in order to hammer home the point. And I can't get behind that. This actually, right after I finished this is unrelated to books. I had binged The Penguin, the new TV show, which I thought was excellent. I really recommend that show. It's great. But in the last episode, the Penguin does something very similar where a bunch of characters that are like minor characters make ridiculous decisions for the sake of the plot. But then it's tied together by the Penguin doing like a really long monologue about like how like, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it's time to like, rise up and eat the rich and all that stuff. And that's like very of the times, like, people are very much feeling the, like, the billionaires are too much angle, all the stuff that's going on in politics right now. And so it's very like in the cultural zeitgeist to talk about that. And it just like was this long monologue just being like, this is what we think. And this justifies that. And that's exactly how I felt about the end of Blood Over Brighthaven. But it's a really good book. And I can't really talk about much of what happens in Blood Over Brighthaven if you haven't read it because of spoilers. But essentially there is a mage named Siona or Skiona maybe who goes to the high mage testing. And she's going to become the first woman to ever do this if she gets accepted. And she has all the pressure of that because it's a very misogynistic society that thinks like women can't do magic as well and all that stuff. And she gets in, and then she starts researching her first project, and it has to do with like colonialism and just like culture clash, and also just like it is. I would call it a dark academia book for sure. Like it has to do with like the way academia can sometimes like brush over other cultures in order to further the dominant culture's knowledge. Yeah, Penguin is excellent. And okay, Discord David, I'm sorry, you were just memeing and I didn't catch it. So yeah, Blood Over Brighthaven's great. Highly recommend it. Sword of Keegan is still better. Okay, we're getting through. Oh, this is a mistake. This is so many books, guys. I'm not doing this again. Then I read In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I only wanted to read this because last year I was on a live with Jordan from iWizard and Britton from some Okie Dude. And Jordan had like a big rant about how much he didn't really like that book and how it's like really popular. And it was a book that like set off the true crime craze, I mean. And so I was like, sure, I'll listen to it. And like, it was good. I liked it a lot for what it was. I do think it was a little unfocused, and it's difficult because I think now the true crime that I've read goes so in depth on like one particular thing that I've come to expect that. And this kind of like spread wide. Like there would be like a chapter where it would like talk about a whole other series of murders just to at the end be like, and maybe that was connected or maybe it wasn't. And I'm like, well, okay, that was kind of a waste of my time. But the central case was really interesting and really horrific. And I'd never heard of it before. And also, like, here's a random fact that probably everybody knew but me. Truman Capote, when he went to like research this murder, took his journalist friend with him, who just happened to be Harper Lee, who had not read or who had not written To Kill a Mockingbird yet. She was just a journalist. And I'm like, that's a wild coincidence. Who would have known? I'm sure everybody but me. I'm not doing this every month, Evie. I'm just not. I'm already regretting this. I'm 37 minutes in. I've talked about like 6 books. I'm dying of thirst. I'm watching The Terror right now, which is an excellent show, and we will get to that. There might be a reason that I'm listening to or that I'm rewatching The Terror right now. And you know, I'm at the part where everybody's just extremely thirsty and dying of starvation, and that's how I feel right now. Oh, Evie knew that fun fact. Look at that. Evie, keep driving. Don't text in red light. Okay, so after that, I read Sabriel by Garth Nix. I had never read any Garth Nix. I have heard lots of great things about Sabriel, and I guess I didn't understand what it was actually about. Like I went into it with weird expectations. I thought it was about a kid, which is totally fine when it's not. Like I really like Sabriel, but the girl's 18 throughout the whole book, which I just didn't know. Like, you know, with the way people talk about it, I thought it was like an 11-year-old, and it's totally not. In my head, I kind of compared it mentally to like the Golden Compass, and like I get why people would, but this girl was way older than Lyra, which is just interesting. So Sabriel follows. Okay, so there is a person called the Abhorsen, which is, I mean, it's called the Abhorsen Chronicles, and the Abhorsen is Sabriel's father, and he goes missing, and she is at an academy for like magic and girls, like girls magic academy or whatever, and her dad goes missing, and she has to go find him, and she goes on a quest, and she gets a magical cat who's awesome, and there's all these other little like creatures and people she comes across, and I found this like really, really good. It didn't quite get like to a 5-star to me. I think maybe just it went a little bit too long for what it was trying to do for me personally, but I thought the book was pretty consistently really good to great throughout the whole book. I loved Sabriel as a protagonist. I loved the world of this. I liked that like she was trying to keep the status quo together, which I just think is a little bit more interesting than like what everything else is trying to do. And you know, she's trying to find her father, which like who can't relate to, you know, from familial love and stuff. And I thought the like companions were all great in this book. I guess my criticism, if it was even a criticism, would be that the villain is talked about a lot in the book as like what he's going to do and what's going to happen. And then when we kind of get to the villain stuff, it just kind of, I don't want to say peters out. That's not quite it, but it doesn't live up to how much people talked about it. And I think that's partially just that it is kind of like straddling that middle grade YA. I think it's firmly a YA. I don't think it's middle grade. Like the language is a little bit more complex, but it just, I maybe needed a little bit more to like sell the villain to me, but that's a minor thing. But overall, also, I just thought Garth Nick's writing was so smooth. Like it just, you always, whenever I wanted to read it, I just listened to it even longer. It's so good. You should reread it. It's good. I really want to continue on with the series and read the sequels. It was really good. I have no problems with it whatsoever. And I think it's like, I know it's talked about quite a bit in our like small circle, but I think it's underrated. Like I think it has way more appeal than what I didn't hear about it at all until like, a couple of years ago. Like I lived my whole life without ever hearing about it. And I just think that's absurd. Like maybe it needs an adaptation. Maybe that's what would sell it. But yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And you guys should go read it if you want like a little bit of I wouldn't even like, one of the appeals of the book is that it kind of speaks to any reader. Like it doesn't talk down to the reader, which I think is great, because like a 12-year-old could read Sabriel and love it. And a 42-year-old could read Sabriel and love it. And they could even love it for the same reasons. It's just a good book, guys. Like go read it. That's all I got to say. And that's all I had to say about that. Then I read War by Bob Woodward. And it was a good book. Bob Woodward is a good political analyst. And, I don't want to get bogged down in politics here, but it's about like, the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza and Palestine and all that, and kind of what led to it all and what's been going on with it. And if you're at all interested in what led to all of that stuff, it's a good book. I'm not going to say much more about it than that here. Bob Woodward kind of always writes like they're always just good. You're like, oh yeah, I got all the information I needed out of it, and that's that. It does have translations. I read it in Dutch the first time. Interesting. That's good to know. I reread quite a bit, David. I would say on average, I average about 30 rereads a year, depending on the year or like what I'm reading. I really like rereading, especially for books that it's been a few years and I didn't even have like mixed opinion on, but I liked, but like had some problems with, because sometimes your problems with a book that you really like might just be in that moment. Like I could have just been, tired that week, or I could have been, specifically irritable about, one thing that's going on at work, and then the character reminded me of that, or who knows. So it's nice to give yourself that chance to re-examine. Yes, I am going to read the new Hunger Games book. I have it pre-ordered, and they have a celebrity narrator reveal coming on Monday. So that'll be interesting. I might listen to that depending on who it is. Let's see. Next, we have Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. So Gillian Flynn, sorry. So I haven't read Gone Girl yet. I'm going to read that soon, hopefully. And I read Sharp Objects a few years ago and really did not like it. I thought it was kind of terrible. I thought it was really edgy, just try hard edgy. And I thought it kind of glorified cutting, like your wrists. And I just thought, just kind of a gross book, and like, I don't know, just made me uncomfortable in like the worst ways, like not in a way that I wanted to be. Didn't really like it. And so I was like, well, I'll read Gone Girl because that's the favorite. And then Dark Places was available at the library. And Dark Places was incredible. I really liked it. I think this is my new favorite thriller book. But it does play a little bit to my tastes. So I understand that other people might not feel that way. What Dark Places is about is there's this girl who's, when she was a little kid, her brother allegedly killed the rest of her family and went to jail for it. And he was partially put in jail because of her testimony. She said that she heard his voice from the other room when he was killing everybody. And so he's been in jail for his whole life. And then she's become like kind of famous as being like the sole survivor of this family massacre. And then there's all these, true crime aficionados that are like researching the crime. And they're like, actually, we don't think he did it. And she's like, how dare you come to me with this? And she's struggling with money, and they're like, we'll pay you to like go talk to all these people about the case, because they won't talk to us, but they will talk to you. And we want to know what actually happened in this case because the facts don't line up. So she was like, okay, I really need the money. I haven't talked to, my brother or any of these other people in a long time. So maybe I'll do it. And I just was glued to the page. You get flashbacks from the brother's perspective, and I thought pretty consistently they were really cringy. Like he was an edgelord in just like the worst way. Kind of just like a yucky guy to read about. But the actual like narrative about what's going on and who's lying about what, and her investigating and talking to all these people and trying to remember like the real thing that happened in her past. All great. I was hooked. Couldn't stop reading. Also, this book deals like a fair amount with satanic panic, which is something that as like, you know, I grew up a metalhead. It, you know, didn't really affect me because I grew up past the satanic panic, but it's always something that like resonated with me as like an injustice. Like just because people like, you know, listen to this type of music or play D&D or whatever, people thought they were like, you know, worshiping the devil, and it just drove me crazy. I think there's a fair bit of inspiration from the West Memphis 3 in this book. I think it was very clearly on Gillian Flynn's mind when she was writing it. And if you want a thriller, I highly recommend it. It's just like, you know, fast read that has a good mystery going, and I was satisfied with the twist, which I'm usually not. Yeah, I hope it's Woody Harrelson too, Evie. Like, I think that's who it's going to be, but I guess you don't know. I was annoyed with the Dune ending because I was in the mood for something else and I rushed it. Yeah, very true. That happens. Tend to only incline to read S tier things or things like that where I know I get more out of it. Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't tend to reread stuff where I gave it like 3 stars or something, unless it's like a bunch of my friends really liked it and I'm like, well, maybe I missed something. But sometimes I reread. Like I reread Cujo last year and I liked it a lot more in reread. So sometimes it's like you just never know, and you might just be in a mood to give something another try. So yeah, satanic panic was like a really big thing in the US in like especially the 80s, but probably the early 90s as well, where, you know, people were just so worried about devil worshippers. There was a very famous case called West Memphis 3 that when I was in high school got a lot of media attention. Like, it happened before I was in high school, but it got a renewed interest of media attention, where these 3 teenagers were convicted of killing these boys, and the only evidence against them was nothing. They were just kind of, they wore black, they read Stephen King, and they listened to metal, and they you know, they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was literally no evidence against them, and then they went to jail for a long time, and they are out now finally. But like at the time, all the metal bands I was listening to were like really involved with trying to get them free. Like Disturbed was my favorite band at the time, and they like released a song that was like about them called 3. So I was like really into the West Memphis 3, like getting justice. I was like, how dare they? Like, I listened to read Stephen King and listen to metal and wear black. Like, this could have been me. So it's something that like triggers me, that when people like, you know, are getting accosted because of it. Yeah, the narration for War was really good, Joseph. I really liked it. Yeah, that was, I highly recommend it on audio if you're interested. I will add this to my list, Joe. Also, can you tell me if you prefer to be called Joe or Joseph? I never know, and I feel rude calling you Joe if you don't like it. So just let me know. Okay, so after that, I read Welcome to Pawnee by Jim O'Heir. This is like the guy who plays Gary, Jerry, Larry from Parks and Rec, his like memoir about being on the show. It was fine. I actually only read it because when I was watching Parks and Rec a few years ago, which is one of my favorite comedy shows, I read all of the cast's books. Like pretty much all the cast, besides like 2 or 3 people, have books, and I read them all in a row just while I was watching the show. And so I was just like, well, like I got to read this one. Like I read everybody else's books, and Jim O'Heir like kind of seems like a whiny guy, but it was a fun book. Like it had some good stories. If you like Parks and Rec, I recommend it. I gave it 3 stars, and that's about all I have to say about it. You know, it's perfectly acceptable way to pass the time. All right, sounds good, Joseph. Hello, Amy. How's it going? It's been a while. Nice to see you. So after that, I read Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear by Sheenan McGuire. This is the 10th book or 10th novella in the Wayward Children series. And this series has been like a mixed bag for me because they're very loosely connected. Like it's not really a series in the way that most series are. There's like some characters that come back and you know, some overlapping concepts and stuff, but essentially each novella will tell the story of a different kid. And they're like the through line is that the kid is always somehow lost in either some emotional, physical, or spiritual sense. And then the orphanage for the people will somehow come in, like they'll get adopted by this group of people or groups of people. And so this one was about a girl who got adopted by some parents who she felt didn't really love her, and she forms a bond with some turtles, and she realizes that there's more to what's going on with the turtles than she expected. And I really like this one. This might be my second favorite of these novellas. I found it very charming. I really liked the main character. I think her name was Nadia, but I might be forgetting it now. But the main like through line of the book are these giant turtles that people like. You get a turtle for yourself when you like live in this world that she goes to. And I just like that. Like, you just get your own little personal turtle that you like form a bond with. It reminded me a little bit of like Avatar The Last Airbender, where like you get a sky bison, but in this you get a turtle. And yeah, it was just an enjoyable, light, like little read. I highly recommend it. Yeah, like 60 second. Honestly, I'm not even keeping count. I'm just going down my Goodreads list and I'm just going. I think I've done like 12, Ian. It's absurd. This is so ridiculous. Don't let me do this, Ian. Okay, so here's the book that I was going to keep secret. I was going to not tell anybody I read it. In fact, I didn't tell anybody I was reading it until I was like 85% in and there was like a good twist. And I was like, okay, I got to talk about this. And that is Severed Echoes by Anya Dillon. Anya Dillon is a friend of mine from the Jimmy's Discord. And everybody in Jimmy's Discord was reading it over the last few months because she released a book. Everybody was very excited about it. And, just reading people's books that I know just makes me nervous, because if I think it's bad, then I have to be like, oh, yeah, I read your book and it was bad. And that's just not fun for anybody. Nobody wants that. So I was like, well, I'll just start it. And if I don't like it, I just will never tell a soul that I read it. And I have to admit, at the very beginning, I was a little skeptical. I thought it might go the way where I don't tell anybody I was going to read it, because I thought it was just going to be a kind of domestic thrillery type book where this woman gets abducted and there's just some crazy people that have her. And I was just like, I just don't know about this. And I'm really glad that I actually gave it a chance, because there's a lot more going on in Severed Echoes than you think. And, I thought I guess not necessarily a twist. I guess when you realize what's been going on the whole time. Oh, I froze. Can anybody hear me still? I might have to redo this. Hold on. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Okay, well, you guys can hear me, but you can't see me. I don't know why that's happening. That's funny, Ian. Okay, well, I would like some sort of. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened there, but we're back. Okay, so I froze. Severed Echoes, there's more going on with it than you expect. And so as somebody who studies psychology, I don't want to give anything away about this book, but it does lean in to some stuff that I know about. And I found it all really interesting. It's a dual narration, so you get the first person perspective of the main character, and then you get the third person perspective of one of the people who has abducted her. And so the third person POV switching at first was a little jarring to me, but then I got right into it. It was kind of nice to get like only the main character's thoughts and then switch over and like have a wider perspective of what's going on, kind of like behind the scenes, quote unquote. I don't even want to tell anybody the first layer of what's going on in this book beyond that she gets abducted. So the only thing I will say is that this woman is going to start a new job somewhere, and she gets abducted by some dudes and taken to a motel. And it doesn't go where you think it's going to go. I am really excited for the second book, which I think is like when the second book comes out, I'm going to read it right away because like the first book ends on like a pretty crazy cliffhanger, and I thought it was really good. So if you guys are looking for a book to go read that's really fast and is interesting and is dealing with like some high concept stuff while also just like grounding the character parts, I highly recommend Severed Echoes by Anya Dillon. Okay, classic Kyle for sure, Rogue. I know. Like, and what's weird is I don't even have like internet problems right now. I don't know why that happened. Like, I have full bars, but it's just is it really a Kyle stream without technical difficulties? That's the real question. Then I read Servant Mage by Kate Elliott. This novella started so strong, and it just isn't quite. I really wanted this to be a novel. So what Servant Mage is there are, I think, 5 different types of mages in this world, and this is a standalone novella. So she didn't write anything else in this, as far as I know. But there's different types of mages. Like, it's not quite earth, water, fire kind of thing, but there's several like that. And then the main character is a fire mage. And in this world, mages have been stripped of their power, and they're not allowed to congregate together. Like, if you have all 5 types of mages together, they're made stronger by each other. It's called like an iron fist or something like that. I don't remember. And they want to disabuse people of that notion as much as possible. So they basically have like fed propaganda to people over time. And there was like a rebellion at some point to take over from the magic users. And so now mages are basically slaves, and they're kept in very bad conditions. Like, the main character that we follow isn't allowed to shower unless she has to she gets paid for she's a fire mage, and she gets paid to like start their stove and stuff like that over time. Like, she just like is an indentured servant, and then she gets like this very measly wage, and she will then use that wage, quote unquote, to be able to take a shower. So it's like they just live in ridiculous conditions. And then she gets busted out by this like kind of group of other mages because they want to basically have this group of 5 mages that can then be more powerful and basically can enact in a rebellion against this new regime. And all that sounds great because it is. And I thought the main character was good. I thought also there's like so for a novella, this annoyed me, but I think if this was in a longer book, I would have really liked it. There's like a 10-page segment in this where she's just like, I'm not going anywhere. Or they're like, you're not going anywhere until you shower because you stink. And she's like, well, like, I don't know how we can get a shower. And there's like a whole side part about like making sure she showers. And then like when she showers, about how much more dignity she has because of that. I think it took up too much page count for the amount of book there was. But I do like that, like, it really focused in on how horrible the conditions were and how much better she felt like once she was able to like actually be able to take care of herself and have some autonomy over her physical being. I thought that was great. My complaint with this is just that it shouldn't have been a novella. Like, it genuinely needed more. I don't know why this was such a short thing. I felt like by the time we got to the main conflict, it was basically over. I would love like a novel or a series of novellas or something like this. Oh my God, Jordan's here. Ian, I am a nice person. You can show me stuff that you write. I'm not going to be mean. Or don't. That's fine. I support you either way. So Servant Mage, I gave a 6.5 out of 10 to. It was my first Kate Elliott, and I have a lot of Kate Elliott books on the TBR, and like I left impressed with like the idea and the character and the writing. I just needed more from this particular story, unfortunately. So after that, I read Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series. And I told people that I would read at least 3 of these books because apparently they get more and more like epic over time. And I would say this is the first Throne of Glass book, or even just Sarah J. Maas book, that I've read where I like genuinely enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I still think there's like a lot of like cringy, like individual lines, like the way people will talk or think about each other is just annoying. Oh, Becky's reading Heir of Fire right now. Yeah, like I liked the book a lot. Like I don't like, so at this point, I think it's safe to say that Throne of Glass is just an epic fantasy series. Like I don't see people describe it as epic fantasy. I see them describe it as romantasy, and I'm here to tell you right now, like 3 books in, it's not that there's no romance, but like lots of books have romance. But this is an epic fantasy series, like through and through. It has like multi POV, like political factions, like rebellions and wars, and all sorts of like magic shit happening. Like it is is an epic fantasy series. And I liked it a lot. This book introduced more like factions and POVs. Some of the POVs were more interesting than others, and one of them is like clearly another upcoming love interest for the main character. And I think she just has too many love interests now. So I could see why, like, the romance stuff is probably about to take a deep cut upwards. I don't agree the first book in Throne of Glass felt like a romantasy, really, but that is the most romantasy of them. Like, I mean, the main plot of the first book is that she has to, like, kill a bunch of people. Like, that's, like, the romance is definitely a subplot in the first book, which, like, the first book is the most romance focused so far. So, yeah, and so Becky's reading it too, and she agrees. Yeah, I think the first book feels like YA fantasy. And then from there, like, I still think it feels like, I would call it new adult if I was like zeroing in on like a genre label. Like, it feel, because like the characters are like, early 20s now or whatever, so they're not teenagers. But yeah, it's an enjoyable book. I kind of regret. So what happens sometimes with me with TV shows, especially with comedies, is I'll put them on for a while and I won't be very invested, so I'll be on my phone like a lot, and then I'll slowly realize that the show is really good. And then I'm like, man, I really wish I'd like paid attention to the stuff leading up to this. And that's my own fault. I have no one to blame for myself. But this is what happened with Throne of Glass, where the first two books I thought were fine. And then this book I genuinely enjoyed, but I definitely like was missing some stuff from the first two books because I didn't care enough to remember the stuff in the first two books. And I was like, oh, well, it'll make sense. Like, I don't think I was ever confused, but I definitely would have benefited from paying a little bit more attention in the first two, which, that's my fault for being a hater. Like, I have nobody to blame but myself. So I will probably read book 4 soon-ish because they're easy reads, and I'm really loving easy reads right now because, I work a lot. I work so much, and I just want something easy a lot of the time. So, but yeah, I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. I really liked it. Maybe I'll lower it now. I think it's an 8 out of 10 with a little bit of distance because I think I was letting shock give me a little bit more value, but I do think it was a highly enjoyable book. And Ian says the fourth book is really good too, so that's awesome. And so does Jordan agree. So yeah, I agree, K Fox, like that new adult is not a genre, it's a demographic label, but so is YA. So that's really what I'm talking about. And when I say that, like genre, it's epic fantasy, like no question. I am itching to continue Malazan, Ben. It's just that it's so big and brain consuming. But you know what? Look, Ben. So right next to me, these are the books I'm going to start reading after I finish the books I'm currently reading. I have The Will to Battle. You don't care about that. And I have Caliban's War. So get all the way off my back. I will be reading it soon. Yeah, Jordan. So far, I like Throne of Glass a lot better than ACOTAR, but I've only read the first ACOTAR book. So yeah, Becky is also agreeing. And Becky, correct me if I'm wrong. You're just No, you've read Throne of Glass previously, or sorry, ACOTAR like previously, and you're just now starting Throne of Glass, or you want to reread? Okay, so after that, it was Claire Keegan Redemption Time with Foster. Foster's very short. I don't even think it's a novella. I honestly think it's a short story. And Foster's really good. It is about this girl who is taken in as a foster by some people, and she has a certain idea in her head. This is so short that I feel like anything I tell you is going to give away some stuff. She has an idea in her head about what her life has been about and what's going on, and some things change when she learns different information. And then it's about her journey of discovery, like it's coming of age, I guess, in a way. And I just thought the writing in this was really good. I really liked the main character, and I thought the end was very emotional. I saw some people say that it made them cry, and I don't think I had enough story for it to make me cry, but it was really good. And it makes me want to reread this again at some other point, but also give the other Claire Keegan another shot because I was like, okay, well, I don't think I was in the headspace to listen to the first one originally. Yeah, I think it is. She does mostly short stories and novellas too. Like all of her stuff is really short, but Foster really impressed me. So I want to give her a little bit more attention when I give her another shot. Foster is really good. Yeah. So it's your first time reading Throne of Glass. So Becky, Heir of Fire your favorite so far? Okay, I'm gonna take a sip of water. I didn't realize how much I rely on like letting other people talk on live streams. This is so Ian, you missed when I talked about small little things or small things like these. I listened to it the day after Assassin's Fate. So I didn't retain much of anything. Oh, you like Crown of Midnight more. Interesting. Well, maybe you'll change your mind by the end of the third book, but if not, that's okay. You have weird Song of Ice and Fire rankings too, so that's fine. Okay, so next I have my DNF. I DNF'd Ice by Anna Kaven. I read about 50% of this. It's a short book, so that's like, 80, 90 pages, something like that. I just don't. Again, I know that I didn't finish it, so like this isn't really an indictment of it, but I don't get what this book is about. Like I don't. It was really weird. It's about this guy who's trying to follow this girl that he's obsessed with, in like an ice post-apocalyptic wasteland. It seems like, and it just bored me to tears. Like I don't have anything else to say about it. I would not go around saying this is a bad book by any means. Like I just, maybe I wasn't in the mood. Like I'm not ruling out ever trying it again. I know a couple friends who really like this book, but I just, every time I went to read it, I would just like sit there and like read 5 pages and then like go like do something else. And I was like, I just don't want to be reading this. So I was like, screw it. There's other things to read. And so I DNF'd it. So sorry to Vess, who loves this book. And I think Joanna really likes it as well. But, it just wasn't doing anything for me. And Evie, I have no idea what book we're on. I think we're like at least halfway through though now. I think we're making progress. Well, actually the books that I have more to say about are coming up. So that's great. Yeah, like the next like 3. Well, we'll see how it goes. So next is James by Percival Everett. This is an extremely popular book. I feel like it's been seen everywhere lately. But if you don't know about it, it is retelling of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's perspective. And it's great. It is worth the hype that people give it. I thought it was excellent. I also think, like, I don't think you need to have read Huckleberry Finn to have read it. But if you have read Huckleberry Finn, I think he does a really good job of matching, like, the narrative cadence of Huckleberry Finn. Like, it reads like a companion piece in, like, a very interesting way. It's not a companion piece because it changes things about Huckleberry Finn, which is fine. But I'm just saying that, like, it very clearly is in conversation with, not trying to be in addition to. The perspective. So the perspective is that James teaches his kids and the people around him to dumb themselves down around their like white slave owners, so that people don't get suspicious. But actually, like, he could read, and he like is quite eloquent and everything like that. And then he and Huckleberry Finn go on the run, which was what happens in that book. And just excellent. Like, I think this book is very, very worth the hype. There's one thing about it that I don't like, and I can't say anything about it because it happens pretty late in the book. But the vaguest way to talk about it, without spoilers for the people who have read it, is that there is a decision made about Huckleberry Finn that I don't think I agree with, and I don't think adds anything interesting to the book. And I did think about this quite a bit after, because I'm like, maybe there's something I'm not considering. But it just like largely ties into when people like release tie-in media. And I know that James is not a tie-in media; it's a retelling of like a classic story. But when people do release tie-in media, and they just do certain things that tends to drive me crazy. And this hemmed a little too close to that for me. So that decision is the only thing. Like, this book is really, really good, and that decision doesn't end that. But I do think I wish that wasn't done, and I think this would maybe be like one of my top books of the year or something if that was the case. But I also, like, by the way, last page of this book is absolute banger material, just really good. And we're going to talk about more Percival Everett later on, because it was not the only exposure I had to Percival Everett this month, nor will this month be the last time that I read him, because he's great. It's not, well, Ian, it's such a fast audiobook, man. Like, it's like 7 hours on audio. Like, just go listen to it. You read like 27 books a month. Like, you can fit in, James. Okay, so then after that, I really wish that Esme was still here because she's the sole reason that I read this book, but I'm sure she will see this later. I read Evanna Lynch's memoir. She's the woman who plays Luna Lovegood in Harry Potter. It's called The Opposite of Butterfly Hunting, The Tragedy and Glory of Growing Up. And this is a phenomenal memoir. It is one of the best memoirs I've ever read. And it is not for the faint of heart. It's about her eating disorder growing up and all that entails. She talks about it very, very in depth. It's almost like it is mostly about her eating disorder. Like it's not like a, Hollywood story. It's not like it really only talks about Harry Potter, like the filming of the movies a little bit. So like if you're trying to read it for that, I would not recommend that. I wouldn't recommend people reading this without knowing that it's about an eating disorder because it's just like a difficult read. And I've never had an eating disorder. And it's still like I couldn't imagine like how difficult it could be to read if it was triggering for you, because it really is just like an honest, raw portrayal of this problem. Yeah, that's funny. So actually, like, there's only like 2 or 3 memoirs from Harry Potter people. I don't, but yeah, this one is very different than Tom Felton's, who I like Tom Felton's, but it was very much more about Harry Potter. This was like, I think the book, like the end of the book deals more with her adult life, but I would say the first like 80% of the book is about like until she's like 13 years old. Like it's a very deep read. I was very emotional reading it several times. I was also frustrated with her several times. And like, I'm sure she's frustrated with herself. Like that was the point, is that like, I'm like, it's a vicious thing. I do think, and this is not something I am qualified to talk about, so like I could just be totally wrong. But this is just my feeling reading it. I think so. She kept saying, she was like, oh, like I don't have answers for how to deal with this. This is just my experience. So like she did that, but there was a little bit too much of like, oh, we just shouldn't try to help people with eating disorders in this way. But like that was like all of the ways. So like I get it's like a complicated thing and I don't have an answer, but she would be like, here's all the ways people tried to help me and every single one of them was wrong, but also I got better. And I think I understand what she was going for. But at a certain point, it's like, maybe I wanted a little bit more introspection into how those things helped her a little bit better. I don't really know how to put that into words correctly, but it just felt like she was like, all these ways are bad, but also I did get better, but also I'm not better, but also don't do any of these things. And I was like, I don't know what the sum up is here, except that like eating disorders just are terrible. Like, so anyway, if you're looking for something that's, harrowing, but also thought provoking and honest and beautiful, I recommend it. It is not going to be a light read by any means. And then we have Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment by Jason Schreier. StarCraft is one of my favorite games of all time. Blizzard's just plummet has been very interesting to me. And I thought that I would give this a shot because I don't really know too much about the differences of what happened with Blizzard. And it's interesting because I could have guessed with very little information, all of the material, like all the highbrow material in this, or high-level material, which is that Blizzard and Activision merged, and that was a bad idea because Activision was a bigger company and Blizzard was really good at doing one thing, and then Activision was like, but what if you didn't do that thing and you just made money? And Blizzard was like, well, here's the thing we do, and like the people that buy our stuff really like it, and they're like, yeah, but you're only giving us money too slow. Like you need to give us more money more fast. And over time that just eroded everything. That business sucks, that company sucks, everything about it sucks. Seems like a terrible place to work. Just kind of an irritating read, like in the way, like it's intentionally supposed to be. Like, I mean, the book is good. But yeah, Blizzard just sucks. Also, I do find it funny that like one of the funniest things that I think has ever happened is there's like a BlizzCon, and if you don't know about this, you should go watch it. Like it is very funny. BlizzCon, they introduced a mobile game for your phone for Diablo, and the fans had been like expecting a new Diablo game for like PC for a long time. And so they came out and they were hyping all this, and then it was a mobile game and fans were just not buying it at all. And then they said on stage, they're like, do you guys not have phones? Which I just thought was so funny. And then a guy came up to ask a question, And his question was, is this an out of season April Fool's joke? Which is just the funniest thing. Like, kudos to that man. That man's my hero. But I am here to say that this book has an entire chapter dedicated as to why that whole decision was a bad idea. And I just thought that was great. Like, I'm just like, of course, this deserves a whole chapter because it was fantastic. So yeah, good book. I maybe wanted a little bit more depth from it in terms of like it would be like, yeah, they released World of Warcraft and people loved it, and then they would move on to stuff. I'm like, that's like their biggest game. Like, we could probably go more in depth. But if you like Blizzard or are mad at Blizzard, it's a good read. I gave that an 8 out of 10. I'm gonna count how many books we have left, just out of curiosity. 2, 4, 6, 8. Oh my god, we only have 8 more books left. Oh my god, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, happy day. Okay, so next we have The Voyage Home by Pat Barker, and this is funny. People are gonna continue to meme on me forever because of stuff like this, because I can't live down the Wheel of Time skipping 6 books series thing, or skipping 6 books in the series thing. But this is funny because I accidentally skipped the middle book in this trilogy. I had no idea. So the first book in the Pat Barker trilogy, I think is The Silence of the Girls. I think that's the first one. I might be wrong about this because now I'm confused about the whole thing. And so The Silence of the Girls was like an okay book. Like, I liked it. It's a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of the women. Liked all that. I thought the first book focused way too much on just like the woes of Achilles. Like, I'm just like, oh man, like, for what you advertise this book to be, I think it's way more about Achilles than it needs to be. But it was fine. Like, I didn't dislike it by any means. And then at some point, I bought a physical copy of The Women of Troy because I really like the cover of that book. And I guess over time, I had just morphed those 2 books into one book. And so when this third book, The Voyage Home, came out, I thought it was just the sequel because, like, it makes sense. Like, the first book is dealing with, the lead up to Achilles and Hector and all that. And then The Voyage Home would be like, I'm like, okay, well, then, like, that makes sense. This is the next book. There's a whole middle book in there that I didn't read. And I didn't know that until I went to I was already halfway through it, and I went to log it in Goodreads, and it said like number 3, and I was like, oh. So I just skipped the second book. But I know the Iliad and the Odyssey and all this information, so like it was fine. But I just thought that was funny. I felt largely the same about The Voyage Home as I did about The Silence of the Girls, which is like, I liked the line by line writing. I liked the sense of atmosphere. I think Pat Barker does a really good job with that. I like the characterization of the women and the trials that they face, mostly. And this one's not about Odysseus, like you might assume from the title. It is about Cassandra and Electra and Clytemnestra. I don't know how to say her name, but like Agamemnon's wife. And it's about like Agamemnon's journey home after the fall of Troy. And again, this book just focuses too much on Agamemnon. And maybe that's the point, and I miss the point of why they're talking about this and focusing so much on these men through the eyes of the women. Like, maybe that's what she's trying to do. But to me, like, guys, there's so much information and focus on Agamemnon's genitalia in this book. Like, so much. And I'm like, oh my God, like, can we got it in chapter 2? Could we stop? Like, I just feel like there's just so many scenes of just like Agamemnon's junk. And I'm like, can we get over it? So I just, that's exhausting. But the end of the book, where, like, I guess I won't spoil it just in case, you don't know, because this is less widely known than the Iliad and the Odyssey. The stuff that happens with Agamemnon and Clytemnestra and stuff. But all of that stuff, like the last 20% of this book is really good. Like, I liked it a lot, and like everybody's motivations was great. I liked how the book wrapped up. So, I gave this a 6.5. I think I liked it slightly more than Silence of the Girls, but I think maybe this particular retelling just didn't quite work for me. Yeah, I am one more instance of calling it pulling a Kyle when you skip books. Yeah. I think I agree with you, Tori. Like, the idea of it is great, and the portrayal of what's going on, it just didn't fully hit me. Yeah, but Tori, the thing about me reading 1/3 of the books you read in a year is that you read like more deep and analytical than me, and better books and longer. So, don't be too hard. Also, you're a mom. You're out there momming. too many scenes of Agamemnon's junk, for sure, Adam, definitely. So we're at the light of the end of the tunnel here. We're reaching the end. So this one I don't have much to say about. The Diabetes Code by Jason Fung. Unfortunately, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes a couple months ago, and it's stressful for everybody involved because my dad is not a citizen of Canada, which means he has no health care, and it just sucks. So a lot of he has to pay out of pocket for any sort of stuff going on. So if we can help him, because my dad doesn't know anything about nutrition, he'll just be like, "What is a calorie?" And I'm like, okay, you're 60. How have you not learned what a calorie is?" So I've been trying to learn more about diabetes so that I can help him. And the Diabetes Code is a really good book about that. If anybody needs to read one, I recommend it. And that's really all I have to say about that one. So we can move on to Erasure by Percival Everett. This book is made into a movie a couple of years ago called American Fiction. It's starring Jeffrey Wright. And I watched the movie first because I knew it was based on a Percival Everett novel, and I liked it so much that I immediately went and borrowed Erasure. The premise of Erasure is that there is I would describe him as pretentious Black author who's been writing books for a long time that like a small amount of people really love, but he has not received wide acclaim. And there's like some struggles going on with his life. His mom has Alzheimer's. His brother, his marriage just fell apart. He has a contentious relationship with his brother too. Some stuff happens with his sister, and he's just very stressed out. And he's annoyed that he doesn't get the recognition that he thinks he deserves. And then he sees this book come out by this Black author called I Lives in the Ghetto. And he gets really mad that it's like caricaturizing Black people for profit. But then he needs money. So he does a satire version of that called My Pathology that he writes, which is like very heavily stereotyping and pandering about like a certain perception of the Black community. And then he's offered a ton of money for it and movie rights and all this stuff. And he has to pretend to be a convict that is releasing this book. And he releases this whole like side persona. And so I'm going to start with the movie because I started with the movie. The movie is absolutely excellent. Everybody in this movie is killing it. Jeffrey Wright is killing it. Sterling K. Brown, amazing. Just a phenomenal movie. Should have won Best Picture. It was nominated for an Oscar. A really, really good movie. And then the book is also really good. Who knew? Percival Everett can write quite a bit. I had a bit more of a problem with Erasure than I did with James, though, which is that. So the novel, the setup for both things are exactly the same. What I just said applies to both the movie and the book. The book, however, is like maybe 300 pages or so. I listened to the audio, so I'm not entirely sure exactly how long. But I would say 1/4 of the book is like written out version of My Pathology. And I just don't like this decision. For a short book, that is way too much. I would say it's too much for a long book, but I don't. So the whole premise is that like Monk, the main character, hates this book. Like he doesn't think it's good. Like he wrote it when he was angry and annoyed, and then people keep like saying it's good, and it's usually like guilty white people that are like, yeah, like it's about the Black experience, and that makes him mad. And then he gets these like movie deals, and he's like mad about that, and it's just so he doesn't like the book. So I'm like, if our main character doesn't like the book, why am I subjected to like 85 pages of this book that like is really irritating to read because it's like written like phonetically because they're like it's stereotypical and trying to be like like as if the person in it doesn't know how to speak well. And so for like 80 pages it's just like a book that our main character doesn't like, that we are then supposed to spend that much time with. And I just was like, man, I know that we're supposed to be laughing at the idea that these people think this book is good, and like giving it that much context maybe gives us more of an appreciation for how much they are pandering. Like, but it was just so much, and I just don't want that much of this book that was bad in the middle of my good book. So that is the reason this book did not get 5 stars from me. However, every single thing about Erasure that is not that part of the book is incredibly good. Like, I loved it. Just like Monk's like sardonic sense of humor and just like anger and frustration at the world that, like, you know, his selling, when like the minute he realizes he's a sellout is so good. Like, he's just like, I'm a fucking sellout. And just, you know, the ending of the book is really good. I honestly think I preferred the movie, not just because of how much of it was my pathology, but just because Jeffrey Wright is so good. Like, I was envisioning Jeffrey Wright for this whole book. In fact, I really wish that they would have Jeffrey Wright do an audio version of this book again so that I could hear it in his voice. Just a 10 out of 10 performance. But yeah, read Percival Everett, guys, because this guy's really good, and I will be definitely reading more of him to come. And yeah, so like what Ben says, in the movie, you get like one scene of him imagining the dialogue of the book, and that worked really well. Like, that was great. That's all you needed. So I would have preferred that for sure. Yeah, movie strikes an engaging tonal balance, ends up feeling organic and emotional. Totally agree. Hey Jake, how's it going? And yeah, you know, yeah, it sucks about my dad, but I'm doing what I can. Thank you, Ian. I don't think this matters as much as people tend to think it matters. I think both ways can be valuable. I think the movie's better. So, well, I don't know. I wouldn't say the movie's better. I liked the movie better. So, like, I would say the shorter, more enjoyable experience is how I would recommend it. But like, the book is also fantastic. So I don't think either spoils the other in any sort of way. There actually is one major difference between the movie and the book that like is just interesting to me. About one of the family members that like the book does an entirely different thing with than the movie does, and I like the movie version of it better. So maybe that's why I liked the movie better. Okay, guys. We have 3 left. Well, 4, I guess. So, after that, I read The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder by David Grann. David Grann is a nonfiction author who also wrote Killers of the Flower Moon, which was just a big Oscar winner like last year for with Leonardo DiCaprio and Scorsese and stuff. And I really liked Killers of the Flower Moon, the book. So I was like, this seems like a no-brainer. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to what I've been reading off and on all month, which is The Terror by Dan Simmons. The Terror is about a shipwreck, or like an expedition to find the Northwest Passage in the 1800s, and the 2 ships get stuck in the ice, and then nobody ever heard from them again. And I'm just like utterly fascinated with that. And I thought another like ship goes wrong story would be a really good book, like to compare with that. And it actually was a little bit of a mistake once I had read it, because I really liked The Wager, which is a book where in the 1700s, this ship gets, you know, stranded on an island, and there's like maybe, I think it was 89 of them, something like that. And there's like a big mutiny and a bunch of infighting, and there's like a crazy story about how they get back to civilization and all this stuff. And you follow the stories of several of them. But because I was reading The Terror alongside of it, The Terror just goes so much more depth. And The Terror is historical fiction / horror. So like, I mean, you're getting characterization and, you know, POV characters and all. Like, it is a novel. So that's unfair to The Wager. But I just kept feeling like there'd be a really interesting event in The Wager because that's all we had the information about. And I'd be like, man, it'd be really great to explore this in more depth, like The Terror, which, you know, is not the fault of the book. But I thought The Wager was really a great story that was just too trunicated for me in that moment. So maybe like it's been getting a lot of really great reviews. I still gave it a 4-star. I probably give it like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. But maybe with Distance from the Terror would have been a better idea, not buddying it up with 2 like shipwreck type books at once. Yes, the Franklin expedition. Yes, absolutely. The Wind and Truth stuff, like, I know this isn't I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. I don't. So like every book that people don't like, I try to take like their view on it. And I usually can, like, you know, I'm pretty good at it. Even like for books that I love, like when people tell me they don't like Stormlight Archive, like almost all the reasons people tell me they don't like Stormlight Archive, I'm like, yeah, I see that. I don't agree. but I understand. Like when people are like, I don't like the characters, or I don't like his humor, or like it's too long, or like it's meandering. Like I don't necessarily agree with any of that, but I can see it. But I don't understand a lot of like, so like if people are disappointed in Wind and Truth, sorry, for anybody who's just listening, Ben asked me, he said, while we're on stream, can you wrap up Wind and Truth? I know how you felt, but I'm curious what you've been making of its wider reception. That's why I just randomly transitioned to Wind and Truth. I kind of forget some people just listen. But I don't get like if you've loved the first 4 and you read the 5th book, like hating it. Like I've seen lots of people do that. Like their feelings are valid. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I've heard their complaints, and they're complaints that I also have sometimes. I'm just like, yeah, I just don't see how that was that big of a deal. And I'm just at a loss. I don't understand why it's this polarizing. I do think there was aspects of it that were clearly worse, but I thought there was a lot of stuff that was a lot better. So, you know, I can't get it. I don't understand. Like, you know, this is not calling them out in any way. Like their opinion is, you know, totally valid and reasonable and all that. But the fact that, you know, Austin and Richard from Two to Ramble can have a 3-hour podcast ranting about how much they didn't like it when they loved the first 4, that is just confusing to me. That's all. Like, and I, you know, I wish everybody the best that didn't like it. I hope the next book works better for them if they're going to continue, but it's just confusing to me. I read The Wager and The Endurance this month and loved both. I don't think I know The Endurance. But yeah, The Wager is like, I feel like if I had read The Wager like a month ago, I would have liked it a lot more. I think it was a timing thing. I'm excited for the movie. I think it's a good book. It just, the terror is so much better. Like that's really the problem. Yeah, I saw that Murphy has a video. I just haven't watched it yet. Like I did get a little burnt out on people just like viciously complaining about it. So but I will, Murphy's usually reasonable. So, yeah, like, so that's the thing is that like, if people like, you know, some people in the comments are saying that they read like 2 books of Stormlight and then DNF'd. Yeah, like, I mean, I think you guys suck, but you know, it's your opinion. Like, no, like I get why people wouldn't like the series. Like it makes a lot of sense. I just think that heel turn on the 5th book is just confusing to me is all. Like it just, you know, I don't get it. I think maybe there's probably a lot of reasons for it, but I think one big one is that I bet the ratio of modern phrases was just high enough to make more people notice them, and then that was kicking them out, so then they were noticing all the other things they didn't like. Like, that's the only good guess that I have, because I don't know, there's a lot of good stuff in Wind and Truth. But anyway, this is not about Wind and Truth, and I can talk about Wind and Truth for a lot, so we gotta focus. Yeah, Kronk's video was really good. I liked his video a lot. Yeah, Joseph, I agree with you. Jordan, what are we buddy reading? Yeah, okay. So we have a lot of comments about Wind and Truth, and I just I'm gonna get bogged down, and I really want to finish these. But after I finish, if anybody has more Wind and Truth stuff, we can talk about that. Okay, so after that, we have Redshirts by John Scalzi. This was quite fun. So the premise of Redshirts is it's a Star Trek meme, essentially. So if you don't know what a red shirt is, if you're not really in like the Star Trek community, which I also am not really, when they would go on like excursions to a planet, it would be like 5 main characters. It'd be like Kirk, Spock, whoever the hell the other people are, and then like one guy named Tim. And Tim would always be wearing a red shirt. And then they go around and they get attacked by Gorgons or space scorpions or killer robots or whatever. And then they'd be like, oh no. And then Tim would get killed. And then that's supposed to show you that these things are really dangerous because Tim died. And then the next episode, it would be John. And then there's always a red shirt. And you always know the guy in the red shirt is just a random crew guy that's going to get killed. And yeah, exactly. So the red shirt always dies. Yeah, for sure. And so the premise of this book is a guy joins the crew of this Star Trek, or not Star Trek, it's like spaceship Enterprise type thing. And everybody's acting really weird, and they're like avoiding the like central crew, and like it would be something like, oh, like, you know, if Kerensky gets injured, then you can be near him, but if he's going on an away mission, you got to stay away from him or else you're going to die. And this guy's like, what the hell are you talking about? You guys are acting all so weird. And so they start explaining to him, like, we don't know what goes on in the ship. We just know that a lot of us die. And we don't really totally get why, but we've figured out like ways to do this so that we don't all die. So it becomes this whole meta thing where they realize they've been attacked by the narrative, the capital letters, the narrative, and they have to deal with the fact that somehow the narrative has taken over their life, and they no longer have control of it because the narrative decides when they're around these characters that they're going to get killed. And everybody's going to stop behaving logically. And it's poking fun of Star Trek, but also just largely poking fun of like television logic. Like I don't think you have to love Star Trek or even know it to like this book. As long as you're familiar with the way TV shows can sometimes use dumb TV logic. I think that's way more of an important core concept to understand, because that's a lot of what it's poking fun of. And I thought it was a fun book. I actually really loved the first like 25% of it, which mirrors how I felt about Starter Villain by John Scalzi, where I loved the beginning and then I really didn't like the rest of that book. Redshirts didn't quite go that way for me. I really loved the first 25%, and then I liked the middle, and then I kind of started getting really like, okay, this joke has ended for me. And then I loved the end of the novel. And then he does 3 really long codas that barely have anything to do with the book, but are still clearly like in universe, like it's still part of the novel, and I just didn't like those at all. So it was like a really mixed up and down experience for me. I gave it 3.5 stars, like a 7 out of 10 initially, and I've come down a little bit. I think I'm giving it a 6 or 6.5 just because I really didn't like those codas at the end. I thought they killed the ending of the book that was excellent. So, yeah, so this is what I thought. So I read I watched like a fair bit of Next Generation and Enterprise and Voyager with my dad as a kid, and I didn't remember Redshirts dying as much. So I was like, maybe this is just more of an original Star Trek thing. Like I've seen it happen, but maybe not as often as it did. Yeah, this is the other part of the book where it's like the thing that makes it fun is they always name the red shirt and bring them along as if they are a main character everyone knows, but the audience is just like, who the hell is that guy? Yeah, the prologue of Red Shirts does this to like incredible effect. Like it's just like this guy who's like the son of an admiral, and then the main character, like the captain's like, oh no, I knew his dad, and his dad and I go way back, and his dad saved my life one time, and it's just like. But it's just really funny. It is a very humorous novel, but it just maybe went on a little too long for me. Yeah, Rogue says, I didn't think the codas were necessary, and I agree. I wasn't a fan of them whatsoever. And Ian says, Starter Villain was such a bummer in the end, made me nervous to read more Scalzi. Yeah, so I have a bunch of Scalzi books on Audible, so I will try more of him. But so far, like 2 of his books have started great for me and just gotten worse from there. So I don't know if he's going to be the author for me. Starter Villain I actively disliked by the end of it. So that was worse. Yeah, so Jake says, Red Shirts only die in the original series. It is always the security officer who dies, and they switch to yellow for Voyager and Next Generation. Okay, yeah. Voyager was always my favorite. Not that anybody asked me. I know that's a hot take, but I think I was right at the age where I was actually paying attention to what my dad watched, so I liked it, versus like just knowing that he was vaguely watching. Like I remember seeing Captain Picard a lot as a kid, but I didn't know what was happening in the episodes, if that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, I haven't read Old Man's War yet, but I'm gonna. So I hope I disagree with you, Ben. Joseph has a John Scalzi guide for some reading advice. If anybody's interested and wants to know more about where they should start with John Scalzi. I don't talk about Star Trek very often. That's probably why you didn't know that, Jake, but I'm glad that we agree. Yeah, the Kaiju Preservation Society sounds really interesting to me. And again, it's one of the ones I have on Audible, so I will probably try it. The positive thing about John Scalzi books is they're all pretty short and they're like easy. Like I read most of Red Shirts while I was watching the Terror. So it's like, it was really easy to read. Like it's so fast to get through, which is nice. Ben, I can't believe you've never seen an episode of Star Trek. Like, I'm not even a big Star Trek fan, and that just seems wild to me. But, you live your life. All right, guys, we are on the last book I have actually finished. Are you ready for this? I finished this last night. If you guys saw my Goodreads update, you will know it was phenomenal. It is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. And what a goddamn book. Oh man. This is if I ever do like any like this year we did like the end of the year tag on Matt's channel with a bunch of us. If I do something like that again next year, biggest surprise will almost certainly be this book. Because it's not like I thought I wasn't going to like it, but I just heard some people talking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I vaguely feel like I've heard of that book before, and I'll give it a try. And the premise sounds kind of interesting. The book is written in 1995, Ben, but it was published in Belgium, or I guess published in Belgium, I should say. I don't know if it was what the language of Belgium is because I'm uncultured, but and then it like I don't know if it was never published in English until now or if it just like got republished, but regardless, in 2022 it was published in English either for the first time or like it went out of print and they republished it, one of the two. But for the longest time it wasn't available in English, and it got revival because of TikTok. So like it's been getting a lot of positive reviews because of TikTok, so like it's then become something that people I have interactions with have read. So I looked on my Goodreads when I looked up the novel, and like a bunch of people that I had on Goodreads had just read it in like the last year and given it 5 stars. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. And the premise of I Who Have Never Known Men is there are 40 women trapped in a bunker. They are being guarded night and day. They have no privacy. They are not allowed to touch one another lest they get whipped. Like there's no physical contact whatsoever. And we don't get an idea about what the apocalypse is. You never learn. Do not go into it thinking like you're going to learn some shit about what happened. That's not the point of the book. Okay, so I did think that it was French. So I'm glad that like I second guessed myself on that because I felt like I was like, I don't think that's an actual language. So I'm glad that I was right. And so the narrator of the book is the youngest woman in the bunker. And she doesn't even have a name. They just call her the child. And she's narrating her life and what's going on. And this was just a mesmerizing book. I started it thinking I would just like listen to it while I was like getting ready for bed. And then after I like brushed my teeth and everything, I just like sat there on the couch for like 20 minutes and just listened to the beginning of this book. And then I was like, wow, this is good. And then the next day I like went to work and I thought about it. And then I came home and I finished Redshirts because I was almost done it. And then I just sat there and I listened to the rest of the like 80% of this book in one sitting. Man, I can't even really explain what is so good about this book. It is just mesmerizingly good. I feel like every word in the book is like the exact word it needed to be. Like it, I don't know, it is so beautifully written, but not like, I don't want you to think it's like, you know, having a bunch of turn of phrases and it's using like flowery language or anything. It's not. It's this kid who like doesn't know a lot about the world, and her innocence is so charming and like also very sad. Because none of these women tell her anything about the world, because why would she need to know anything about anything? Like she lives in a bunker. Like she doesn't know how old she is. She doesn't understand what a man is. So she makes up all these stories about like she'll see a guard every once in a while. She's like, I don't even know what a man is. And she'll like make up ideas about what that means. Nobody will tell her what sex is. You know, at one point she gets to see the sky for the first time. And she just had never been able to conceptualize what the sky actually looked like. It just, man, it's just an experience, guys. Like, I don't know, like this might be one of the best books I've ever read. Like, it just was just phenomenal. And it's like really short. It's like 200 pages, 250 pages, maybe. I highly recommend this. Just go into it knowing that you will not get a single answer for anything. If you are somebody that needs to know what happened or why something's going on, you don't get it. And you know, like all of the other women treat the main character poorly. I shouldn't say poorly. They kind of pander to her and don't like let her know information. I remember like there's part of the book, and I'm trying to keep the spoilers for this book is like not a big thing, but still the discovery of it is still nice. But there is a part where she gets really mad at one of the older women because she wants to know. She's like finally like, I am an adult. And I don't know, like, what sex is or what, like, I don't understand how people are made. Like, I don't know anything about my own body. I don't know, like, one of them, like, had a medical issue and she didn't even have the first idea of conceptualizing what this medical issue could be. and she's like getting mad at this woman, and she's like, and the woman's like, well, why would you want to know? Like, you can't do anything with this information. And she's like, it's not about that. It's about knowing to be a person. It's like it's about knowing to know just for the sake of like what it is to be alive. And so this woman's like, yeah, you're right. And so she just starts telling her like, you know, like what just like random stuff about the universe so that she can know some stuff. And man, I don't know. This book really, I already want to reread it. I really like this book. It's a doozy for sure. And if the way that I'm talking about it is not any indication, it is my book of the month for sure. Well, okay, Assassin's Fate is my book of the month, but I kind of don't really count it because I read most of it in December. So it depends on how you count. If anything that I finished in January, it's Assassin's Fate. If it's a book that I actually like started and finished in January, it's I Who Have Never Known Man. Yeah, just a great book. I can't recommend it strongly enough. Also, and this is important to me because I did not like The Handmaid's Tale because The Handmaid's Tale is a stupid book. More on that in a second. And my problem with The Handmaid's Tale is that if you don't like it and you tell people, they just immediately assume you just like hate women. And I'm like, it's not like I'm just like, oh, it's stupid. Like I have very specific criticisms of The Handmaid's Tale. It doesn't make me not a feminist. And these are the reasons why. And you tell all these people this and they're like, yeah, okay. Like they don't really believe me because online, this doesn't really happen, but in person, the thing I get disagreed with about most in my taste in books is that I don't like The Handmaid's Tale. So like I've had like 12 conversations about this book with people, which is a lot in my, everyday life. And I'm really glad that I have this book to be like, you know what? This is a book that's similar, but also totally different. Because my problem with Handmaid's Tale is that the situation that leads to the problems that everybody's having is explained extremely dumb. Like I think it's poorly set up. And Margaret Atwood tried to explain this away in like a stupid way. She's like, it's not the point of the novel how we got here. So she just said some stupid bullshit. And I'm like, well, the stupid bullshit actually matters to me because like I don't believe any of the society you've set up makes any sense because you set it up stupidly. And I Who Have Never Known Men totally bypasses that by being like, it literally doesn't matter what the apocalypse is. The point is about these specific women and what they're going through. I'm like, perfect, wonderful, no notes, fantastic. Because I just get bogged down so much with Margaret Atwood's stupid ass world building and just the idea that she's just like, oh yeah, in 3 years, men just won't care about women anymore. They'll just be totally fine with them being, slaves. And I'm like, I just don't think that would happen. I think that's nuts. So yeah, so I don't like Handmaid's Tale, Dan. Sorry. I don't like it at all. I do like the show. It is what it is. Ian, you absolutely should read Assassin's Fate. Where are you in Realm of the Elderlings? Yeah, Jake chooses to account Assassin's Fate as the book of the month. That is very fair. I do want to try Oryx and Crake. I have other Margaret Atwood that I really want to read. And also I read The Testaments, which, funnily enough, The Testaments, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, takes place like 2 decades later, maybe. And I had like almost the opposite problem with The Testaments. So like I thought the micro story of The Handmaid's Tale is good. Like the stuff with Offred, like her day-to-day, like the actual writing, her struggles, that was all good. And I didn't like the macro story, like the world problems going on. And then in The Testaments, I thought she actually did think through the state of the world and how all this stuff would have rippled out. And I just thought the characters were really annoying. So it was like kind of the opposite problem. Oh my God, Ian, what the hell is wrong with you? You read everything but Assassin's Fate? I am coming to Texas. I'm going to storm the Alamo until you fucking read that book. That's insane. That's upsetting. That's absurd. So the last book I am currently reading, I will finish tonight. So I'm reading The Terror, I already mentioned. I'm on page 578 of about 750 pages. So I will finish it before the night's over. And The Terror is great. So I initially watched the TV show, the miniseries, when it came out in like 2018, and I thought it was phenomenal. Like, what a great miniseries! Loved it. Got obsessed with the Franklin expedition, and then I never read the book. I started it once and just put it down like 30 pages in, and just like for no reason. And and today, like this month, it was minus 40 out on like January 10th, and I was just freezing. I was just in my house in my basement freezing. I'm like, I got to read The Terror. Like, I got to experience real cold. And you know what? Within like 5 chapters, I was like, I don't think I'm that cold. Like, I think these guys are cold. And it just reinvigorated my fascination with the story. Just the idea of these guys being trapped in this ice for 2 years, 2.5 years. And, you know, they all decided to abandon the ships and try to walk through none of it to get to a certain point where they had like of like Western civilization, and they didn't make it. And what the book does, because it's a really good blend of like historical fantasy and horror, is they cross a Inuit spirit called a Tunbak. I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's what it's spelled like. And this spirit wears the basically, it has the appearance of an animal, but it's like a malevolent spirit that they've crossed. And so it starts hunting them, and it looks like a giant polar bear, and it starts killing a bunch of them. And yeah, I just was like, I just, the book was so good. And I got far enough into the book that I wanted to rewatch the show. So I started rewatching the show, and not like I would watch an episode of the show that I've already reached that part in the book. Like I want to experience the book ending, because it's been long enough that I don't fully remember the ending. I just remember the bigger parts. And I should have waited until it was over, because so I'm loving the book. I think the book is great, but I'm very convinced I like the show better. I think the show is fantastic. Jared Harris and Tobias Menzies are phenomenal in it, just unbelievably good. But I realized why I like it better, because so the book does the horror portions of it better. So like, you know, the fact that like how cold they are, and just like how miserable they are, and like the symptoms of scurvy and starvation that they're going through, and of course the fact that they're being hunted by the spirit, all of that horrific stuff is done better in the book. Like the book doesn't have to worry about budget, so it can like tell you that the creature's like 15 feet and moves really fast, and like the show CGI is not fantastic with the monster. So all of that stuff, the book is a clear winner. But the show makes several important character changes that makes, I think, a better story. The main character is, I would say, Captain Crozier, although there's like several main characters, and he's the second in command of the Franklin expedition. And then there's obviously John Franklin is the other captain, and then the third captain is James Fitzjames. And so there's these 3 men. And in the book, they all kind of vaguely respect each other. Like, you don't get a lot of interpersonal conflict with them. I think the other captains kind of see John Franklin as a bit of a bumbling idiot, but it's not explicitly like, they're not like yelling at him or being disappointed. You just kind of think like, oh yeah, they don't really like him that much, and that's about it. But in the show, the interpersonal relations between the three captains is much different. Like, they put a lot of different thought into how each of these captains feels about each other, and the growth that they get throughout the story. And I think that makes me more invested in the whole story, as you see the evolving relationship between these captains. And also, the villain of the book, you get a clue he's a villain, like maybe a third of the way through the book. And then like all of a sudden he's like really villainous. And you like kind of have to fill in the fact that like, oh yeah, everybody's like dealing with scurvy and starvation and all that stuff. So like, so is this guy. But the show makes him a main character from the beginning. And you see him kind of get crazier and crazier. And so that kind of stuff, I think, just worked way better for me in the show. So it sounds like I'm being negative on the book. I really, really like the book. It's probably, unless the ending somehow annoys me in some way, it's probably going to get a 9.5 out of 10. So it is going to be quite a positive experience for me, but it just makes me appreciate the miniseries even more, because that is a banger of a miniseries. The Dan Simmons, Jordan, we know it. Nipple guy for sure. And you know what? He nipples in this book too. He tells you about nipples. But you know what? I read Neuromancer this month, Jordan, and I have been, you know, when you read Neuromancer, other books don't seem as nipply. That's all I can say. Yeah, I really like Crozier and Fitzjames' dynamic in the show too. I just watched like the scene between them where they're both talking about some stuff. Rogue will know what I'm talking about, and that's just like a 10 out of 10 scene. Like, they should have won some Emmys for that scene. I don't agree that the Robin Hobb narrations are horrible. Like, I really like the Farseer narrator, but I don't like the live ship narrator. Yes, I agree with you, Rogue. That's who I'm talking about with Hickey. Like, Hickey in the show is much better than in the book. Yeah, Hannah read The Handmaid's Tale and DNF the show. That's fair. Like, I think the show had diminishing returns over time. Like, I never finished it. Aslan is reading Royal Assassin and loving it. That is awesome. So I am also, beyond those books, I am also reading. Oh, I should say, I read 2 short stories. The Guns of Pharos by Christopher Rocchio is like the new one that was in the Diamond edition of Empire of Silence. It's like a 30-page story or whatever, taking place between Empire of Silence and Howling Dark. I thought it was good. It was a little bit unnecessary, but I like Cassandra Lynn, who is the character it's following, and I liked getting a story from his perspective. So that was good. And then I also read the first short story in this grimoire collection here that we got from Dragonsteel. Really nice cover. At Dragonsteel, there's like 10 authors that had this, including like Robin Hobb and Fonda Lee and stuff. And then we all went and like you got to track down all the authors to get it signed. And so we all, like a bunch of us, like me, Jake, and Ben, and some others went and like Pete went and got this signed. And I read the first story in this, which is by Kat Ogden, Robin Hobb's daughter. And I think it's the first thing she's ever published, but I could be wrong about that. And the reason I am highlighting it, like, and actually talking about it, is because I thought it was really good. Let me see what the short story is called, because I thought it was really. It's called The Season of the Dead Girl, and it is about a world where the world has been flooded to a degree, and so there's these like mermaids that are the souls of dead women that have been neglected or abandoned. And whenever they feel another woman has been neglected or abandoned, they will go and steal her and make her a mermaid. And there's this dad who has a bit of a complicated relationship with his daughter, and his daughter starts to get taken by these mermaids and like the fallout of that. And I thought it was an excellent short story, like an extremely good short story. So I'll be continuing this, but I just wanted to actually make sure I talked about that because I think it's her first published story, and I thought it was really good. So it makes me want her to release more stuff. So that's, interesting. And, you guys should check out Kat Ogden. The apple didn't fall too far from the tree based on what I've read so far. Yes, even Dresden doesn't seem as nipply as Neuromancer for sure. Ian says, I think the Fitz trilogies get progressively worse narrators. OG trilogy was one of the best. I don't agree. I think I reversed it, actually. No, I think the Tawny Man narrator was the best. James Langdon. And then Fitz and the Fool. Although Fitz and the Fool, some of the accents were just terrible. And then Paul Bomer from Farseer. Although the problem with Paul Bomer is he sounds like a 50-year-old man, because he probably was. And, Fitz is supposed to be like a child. So that's a little jarring, but it is what it is. Yeah, I didn't watch season 2 of The Terror. I have no real interest, although they're doing a season 3. Yeah, so Ben agrees with me with James Langdon. Thanks so much for stopping in, Joseph. I'm almost done anyway, so you made for pretty much the whole thing. So thanks so much for sticking around. And Ben says James Langdon was great. I agree. So the other books I'm in the middle of because, while I'm telling you guys that I read a lot, I better be totally, up to date with all the stuff I read this month. I'm currently reading Grave Empire by Richard Swan. I am 130 pages into it. I started my arc of it at the beginning of January because Broken Binding did that incredibly beautiful copy of it. And I really hate that we have started doing this thing where pre-sales for a book of special editions come out before the book. Like, you have to buy it before the book is out. I'm like, how are people supposed to know they want to spend $75 or $100 or whatever on a special edition to a book they haven't read yet? Like, it's just a really bizarre decision to me. I don't agree with it at all. But I had an arc of Grave Empire, and I thought that book looked so good. So I was like, I'm going to at least start Grave Empire to see if I'm going to really like it. And I've actually been loving it. I didn't love the way Richard Swan ended the third book. Like, I kind of thought the third book of the original trilogy was missed for me. Grave Empire takes place like maybe 200 years later, something like that. By the way, I love this cover. So good. And it's totally like you can start here. Like, I know people say that, and there's actually like, I actually don't think, apart from like, people are like, oh, that business happened 200 years ago. Other than that, there's been no real connections overtly to the main trilogy. It's a little flintlocky. I know there's going to be like armored sharks and whales coming in, and it's like the horror elements of this book so far are so cool. Basically, there's like there's a colony. I imagine it as if like when Britain took over England and they had like those like colonies where like the Celts were coming down right on the border where they built Hadrian's Wall and stuff. That's what I'm picturing of this. Whereas it's like the frontier of the empire, and there's all these forests, and they're hearing really crazy shit in these forests. So there's just like, you know, all these soldiers are so far away from home, and every night they just hear like screaming, like loud screaming, and everybody tries to pretend they don't hear it because they can't do anything about it, and like people are disappearing and stuff. And this like new like captain, he like bought his officership, like how the British used to do, and he goes there and he's never been in any combat or leadership situations, and he's like, you guys know there's like lots of screaming out there, right? Is anybody aware there's like some screaming? And they're all just like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And he's like, so am I going? He's like, we don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, this is crazy. And so finally his commander gets upset. This is all early. Like I'm only 25% in the book. So this is all stuff that happened early. His commander's like, yeah, we probably should figure out what's going on here. So he gets this guy to lead an expedition out to see what's going on. And that's where I'm at in the book. Some creepy stuff keeps happening to them. It's like, so the horror elements of it are really good. And then the other POV is this person who is really interested in the merman culture, and they're really reclusive and they don't have a lot of information about them. They're like a scholar of the relations between the two, and for some reason they have to go and have a diplomatic envoy to the mermen. And they have this woman go along because she is one of the only people who knows a lot about them. And so I'm enjoying both plot lines quite a bit. As soon as I finish the Terror, this will be my main read. I think it's pretty good. I also was disappointed in the Justice of Kings trilogy, Dan. If this sounds interesting to you at all, I would give it another shot. I think it feels very different. It's third POV dual perspective versus like first person limited perspective. It's not retroactive. I think the writing style feels very different. The aesthetic of the book feels different. The conflict feels different. I personally think it's worth another shot, but I get being burned by an author. So, and then I'm also, let's see here. I am 150 pages into my Assassin's Apprentice reread. After I finished Assassin's Fate, as mentioned, I was having a lot of trouble just, being interested in the book. So I started rereading Assassin's Apprentice out of my nice illustrated editions. And, it just was what I needed. It just feels very comforting. The beginning of the story feels so much better with more context. And also some of the art in this is just really good. Like this is a good copy for like, the $40 or whatever it was. Like I'm going to try and find a non-spoilery. I feel like people have seen. I can't find them. Anyway, it's a good copy. This like illustrated one, I highly recommend them. They're like, $40 or whatever. And if you like the trilogy, it's a good investment. But yeah, Assassin's Apprentice is great. I don't have anything else to say about it besides book is good. It is slow. Like I remember earlier this week, I was talking to Ben about it because he's reading Dragon Ball Chair and being a hater. And he's like, well, yeah, I feel like this is even slower than Hob. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm 150 pages into Assassin's Apprentice and like no events have happened yet. So yeah, the artwork in this is beautiful for sure, Evie. And then let's see what else I'm currently reading. I read the first 6 chapters of The Land of the Living and the Dead by Shauna Lawless, which is the 3rd book in the Gale Song trilogy, and I like that trilogy quite a bit. The beginning was good. I just then got distracted by other stuff. That'll probably be my audiobook listen after I finish the stuff that I am currently listening to. And I am 30% into Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. This is a recommendation from Ian, so I hope Ian is still here. If not, Ian, this book is really good so far. I really liked the first 20%. And then now it's kind of getting questy and it's not like I'm not liking it anymore, but the beginning I thought was super strong. The premise of Green Teeth is it follows this they call them a Jenny. I don't know. I'm sure it's a mythological monster thing, but it's basically this woman swamp monster thing with big teeth that lives at the bottom of a lake. and somebody tries to burn this. Sorry, this book is not out yet, I should say. This is an arc. It comes out this month, February 25th, maybe. And the town that the lake is near tries to burn this woman for being a witch. So they throw her, or sorry, they try and, do the drowning thing, where if you drown, you're not a witch. And if you float, then you were a witch and we should burn you or whatever. So she gets dumped into this woman's lake, and the Jenny saves her, and they form a friendship, and they're trying to get her life back because she's been accused of being a witch. And it's really fun. It's heartwarming. I'm liking it quite a bit. I did not read The Magicians, Brian, thankfully. And, I'm really glad. Dragonbone Chair is not slower than Assassin's Apprentice. Jake, can you weigh in here? Because this is crazy. Just like factually not true. Like, I think what you mean, Ben, is that you liked Assassin's Apprentice more, so you were more quote unquote immersed in Assassin's Apprentice. So when you were reading it, you felt like it was moving faster, but there's like quite literally less events happening for like most of the book. Like this is just not true. Like you're wrong. Yeah, and I think, Dan, the writing in Grave Empire is quite good for like what it's trying to do personally. But yeah, hopefully you like it if you try it. Ben, this is absolutely not true. There are no events that happen fast in AA. This is just not true. Reread Assassin's Apprentice right after Dragonbone Chair, and we can have this conversation. If you are a true man of your word, you will reread Assassin's Apprentice after Dragonbone Chair, and we can have this discussion more fast. Because I think the Dragonbone Chair, probably the beginning of it, is slower. Like the very beginning, and then way more things happen after, I think. But I don't agree. Jake. But yeah, that was this live stream. I have to admit, 2 hours is not as bad as I was expecting. Thanks for, doing this with me, guys. Like the chat was way more active than I thought it would be. I thought it would just be talking into the void, and I did get a little bit more comfortable just talking by myself, which is good. I am not doing this every month. I'm not stealing, the Jimmy way, but maybe I'll do it again sometime or another. Because my problem with making wrap-up videos is the editing. I really don't like editing. And then, like, if I don't have the physical book, I have to, like, go in and edit the stupid little... And I'm like, man, fuck that. I don't want to do that. So, now this might be true, Jadia. Dragonbone Chair is longer, so I do think that it feels slow. Like, it might... I totally agree with the effect of it might feel slower. That's fine. I just don't think it literally is slower. Those are different things. But yeah, let's see. After I read the books I'm going to read, I'm just going to... I really want to read... I said Will to Battle and Caliban's War, and I also really want to read... What's the second book in the Warrior Prophet? I really want to read The Warrior Prophet. I've been kind of like on a hiatus from series this month. I've only read a couple of series books this month, and I really got to narrow down some series. Well, thanks for the support. I appreciate that. Yeah, I thought this was fun. It's funny because I do so many live streams and I'm never nervous for them. And I was nervous for this one because I was like, oh no, I have to talk and just keep talking. And I think it went well. So, and that's because of all you guys. You guys kept me on track and got me off the track at the right times. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end this, but thank you all so much. And if you are watching this after the fact, I know I bombarded you guys with tons of information, but if there's a book or two or 6 or however many you want to talk about on here that you agree with me or disagree with me on, or just, want to yell at me in the comments about, respectfully, of course, please do so. And if you want to continue teasing me about how much I read and that I don't retain any information, and you are a friend of mine, you can do so. And if you are a stranger, please stop, because that's dumb. So that's the line. If you're like, somebody that's talked to me one time and you're like, the second thing I'm ever going to say to this guy is that he doesn't have a life because he reads so much, maybe don't. That's all I'm saying. Like maybe have some just like social awareness. That's what I'm saying. But yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.